If you're a new music artist struggling to get your mixes to sound clean and professional, then this video is for you. I'm breaking down 5 tips that will completely change the way you think about compression. And it doesn't matter if you're using stock plugins or free tools either. These aren't the same surface level tips that you hear on the internet all the time. I really thought through these. These are practical, underrated tips that I rarely hear anybody talking about. All right, so let's get into it. So most beginners throw one heavy compressor on their signal, squash it to death, and still wonder why it sounds harsh or buried in the mix. A single compressor working overtime will always sound unnatural, and that's where serial compression comes in. Serial compression is basically taking 2 compressors, both doing light work, so that you're not overloading a single compressor. But you may still wonder why this helps. Well, the harder you push a single compressor, the more it squashes the dynamics. This causes you to have to trade between control and dynamics. But when you use serial compression, you kind of get the best of both worlds. This allows you to keep great dynamics as well as allow you to have full control over the vocal. And it also keeps it sounding natural. So a more specific and practical way that you can do this is for the first compressor, you want to have it on a fast attack and only attenuate the loudest parts of the vocal, usually around 2 to 3 decibels. That's the only part you want to compress. Then the second compressor, usually called the glue compressor, is used to compress the whole entire vocal. Since the first compressor did a lot of the grunt work, it makes it so the second compressor has to do a lot less work to the whole vocal, and that way you're not pushing it too hard. Alright, so tip number 2 kind of builds off of tip number 1, but in this context, we're not talking about dynamics, we're talking about the tone. Every compressor has its own character, and I used to be guilty of just throwing on whatever compressor without thinking twice about which specific compressor I'm using. But once I realized that compressors can shape a tone of a vocal, everything changed. It's not just about controlling dynamics, it's about picking the right tool for the mood. For example, if you're trying to mix a rock vocal, you're not going to want to put a smooth, slow compressor like a CLA-2A on. That just completely dulls the energy of the rock vocal. Rather, you would want something punchy like a CLA-76 with a fast attack. This enhances the mood of the rock vocal rather than working against it. So when you're stacking compressors, don't just think about volume levels, also think about the tone, what a lot of people like to refer to as the color. Each one adds something different, and you can use that to your advantage. Alright, point number 3. This is so important. Seriously, this is, if you ignore everything else in this video, this would be the one thing that I want you to take away. Do you ever wonder if your compressor is even helping? One of the easiest mistakes to make is thinking something sounds better just because it's louder. You throw in a compressor, you crank up the gain, and go, yeah, that sounds way better. But does it actually? Or is it just louder? Louder always just sounds better. That's just how our brains work. But in terms of music production, it isn't always better. So if you're not volume matching before and after the changes, you're letting the loudness deceive you rather than hearing the real changes that the compressor is making. Here's what to do instead. After applying compression, turn the makeup gain down until it matches the volume level of the unprocessed signal. Then turn the compressor on and off. This way you're not being deceived by the loudness, but you're actually hearing the change in dynamics. So yeah, big takeaway, always match the volume level with your compressor. That way you can hear what it's doing. Point 4 is kind of a mindset shift. Not everything needs to be fixed with a compressor. It's a misconception that every vocal needs compressed. Depending on the genre, sometimes it does, but not always. Sometimes simple volume automation is a better tool. If the vocal only has a few spots where it's too loud, sometimes it's just better to throw on volume automation and do it that way. Bring up the quiet parts and bring down the loud parts with subtle volume rides. This will help keep the natural dynamics and gives you a lot more control over emotional delivery. Now, I know it is tedious and it takes a lot of time, but it does give you a lot more control that way. Alright, here's the last point of this video. Most beginners overlook this, but the attack and the release on a compressor completely change the way the compressor reacts. A fast attack will clamp down on the vocal really quick, which can smooth things out but also kill the energy. And a slower attack allows those transients to peek through a little bit more and make the vocal feel more alive. And it's the same thing with the release. So the big takeaway from this is don't just set it and forget it. Try starting out with a medium attack and release and then work from there. Use your ears, not just your eyes. Now I understand that these settings can be a little confusing at first, but the sooner that you learn them, the better, because they really give you a lot of control that you didn't realize you had. There's so much more to mixing vocals than just compression. Another important thing is EQ. I just made a full video on everything you need to know about how to EQ a vocal. I'll leave it linked in the description. If you found this video helpful, then hit subscribe. I make videos similar to this one on a regular, and I really think I can help you out if you're taking your first steps in your music journey. Until next time, see ya.